Welcome, everybody, back to the Industrial Insights Podcast Show. I have Paul Lukehart of PL Programs with me. And Paul and I were just talking about a lot of the projects that he works on and the size and scope of projects. And he is an author. So to commiserate with fellow authors, I always love to do the best that I can because I feel that pain. And it's such a joy to have gone through it, to prove to yourself what you know and validate that, and to know it's good enough to share with the world is its own personal journey. So Paul, thank you for being with me today.
Oh yeah, absolutely a pleasure, Justin. Thanks for having me on. I was looking through your previous shows, quite a depth and breadth of subjects, so I was really looking forward to it.
Yes, there's a lot involved in this business, right? The more you're in it, the more you realize between the client, between logistics, between consultants and construction, it's never ending and you can never know it all. So it's good to be surrounded with great people who are on their game.
All right, well, I'll try not to disappoint today.
So you have experience with logistics companies, with Target, with Amazon and XPO. That's kind of a who's who, I would say, in the space. Maybe just for starters, how you manage projects, or what project management really means, is probably the best origin. And then how you got to that spot with some of your background, I think would be a great place to start. And then we can delve into some things that are helpful for people.
Sure. Yeah. So why don't I start off with a little bit of history? The entry into project management was incidental. I started, as you mentioned, in logistics and supply chain. I got out of the army, went to work with Target in a distribution center. I think it was TO 593 out in California. And so I started as a supervisor with Target, great experience, retail distribution. And then after that, worked with Amazon as an ops manager out of the Fernley, I think now closed RNO1 facility.
Okay.
And then after that, I took a job with a company called RailX, which was a 3PL. And what they did was they did refrigerated produce transportation by rail out of California and Washington to the East Coast. And
We
I
got
came on as a,
apples, almonds.
yeah, everything. So like apples, carrots, onions, almonds, pistachios, grapes. They did wine. They did the occasional pallets of frozen squid, which you had to be really careful about so they didn't thaw, like really not great to have in the warehouse. And so it was like a mostly West Coast, East Coast, a little bit of a backhaul back to West Coast with some select commodities. So there was mostly unloading of rail cars, and then cross docking or a few days storage of your produce before you got it into trucks and then out to major like the East Coast, TNS, Hannaford, Stop and Shop, those types of, and a lot of the Ahold brands up on the East Coast. I came on as a site manager for the opening of a Florida facility. And so I come on with RailX, and they have this 42,000-foot space down in Jacksonville, Florida. And they say, guess what? You're the manager of the site. Get this thing up and running. We have a lease. We think we have rack ordered. Like, get it going. Like, you're coming on in February, needs to be operational in March. Ready, go. So it was get down, figure out, get some material handling equipment, hire the team, get the systems in place, do some preliminary testing, and start receiving rail cars. And that was really kind of the first site startup project that I did.
And this is rail served buildings. So
Right. So yeah, you had a rail siding. You pulled up. I think that first building had four doors on a rail siding. So you open the door, the rail car is pulled up. You throw down a dock plate, and you go in and you start pulling out pallets, which are stuffed into the rail cars. Really interesting and probably a unique real estate situation. Like directly rail served warehousing is not extremely common.
totally.
And so that was the first real site startup. After RailX, I went up and managed their other facility in near Albany, New York, in Schenectady. And then after that, went out to Colorado and ended up with through a RailX connection, ended up at XPO Logistics, and they said, "Guess what? You're going to be a project manager." And I said, "Okay, I don't know anything about formal project management, but we've gotten things done before.
I can loosely do project management. Yes, we can formalize this up a little bit.
We can learn about status reports. We can learn about the formal program setup." And so at XPO, as a project manager, I started out as a PM on a large project getting a Nike returns facility up in Lebanon, Indiana started. So I was the key point of contact. I was kind of learning on the fly a little bit about the formal procedures in project management, like what is a PMP, what is monitor and controlling a project mean? How do you execute things? What are the nuts and bolts of maybe more formal program management that our client needed? And so I did that for a couple of years. Went back to the operations side with XPO, left XPO, and then as an independent, signed up. Said I'm gonna I was looking for independent consulting gigs at the time. This was 2020. COVID had
Great
hit.
time to be looking for work.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I was fortunate enough to get a gig as an independent consultant doing exactly what I had done at XPO for a beverage company that was insourcing its first North American distribution center. So that's where I struck out on my own and started like the more formal program management, PL programs. So structuring programs, pulling the teams together, making sure all the parts were identified, all the work was identified and integrated, and then delivered, procured, delivered, and tested. That's what we've been doing for a couple of years. The first project went well. Client retained me for some additional work. Began working with one of their partners. I hired a couple people, a senior consultant, and then a coordinator, and we've continued to expand those relationships and a few other projects.
Man, getting the first client. I love those stories, right? Because that's like you putting yourself out there, someone extending trust based on your like ability to put in the work and like be accountable to the work itself. So yeah, I always like really appreciate those because we are always selling new projects.
Hmm.
And so to really like jump into it and own it.
And
And
it,
so
yeah.
yeah.
I was going to say it is a big leap of trust. You bring someone from an outside organization into yours, and you're like, "Do I like this person? Do they smell good? Do they work well with us?" All those important questions on, is this going to help us accomplish what we want, or is it increasing the risk? Is it going to blow up? We try to be sensitive to that for sure.
Yeah. Is your book the playbook for this process or just like a portion of it?
The books. I think the book you're talking about, Practical Floor Supervision, was a book I wrote after being a director of operations. And I said, there's really not a great resource for being a warehouse supervisor. So I wrote it on the nuts and bolts of being a warehouse supervisor. How do you set up standard work? What are some fundamentals of understanding your operation and the processes in it? How do you do your job effectively? So it's not really directly related to project.
This is after the project is done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is running it. This is operating it. I find one of the important things during your programs when you're setting them up is keeping an eye towards how are they going to have to operate? Who's going to operate them? How are they going to run? And keeping
Yes.
those things in mind from the beginning so you can plan. You don't end up doing a lot of rework on the solution or the team or your ramp plan, which can be really, really damaging to the overall payback and prospects for the project.
Yes. What good is it to deliver a perfect project and then hand it off and have it all go downhill?
Right, right. That's there's on a professional level, I read a little bit about the art and science of project and program management. So there's like operations, which is super interesting in itself. And then we apply that perspective to the projects, but then also project management. You have to look and you say, what is the point? Isn't it? Is it just a bunch of glorified status givers and, task trackers? Like, okay, maybe. But the
Which is
real
like the Gantt chart embodied.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love Gantt charts, but that's not all of it, right? Like the end state of the Gantt chart is helping you identify and avoid risk. So from a schedule point of view, you have to say, man, there's a lease that needs to get signed. They're saying it's going to be done in 3 weeks. Is it going to be done in 3 weeks? I don't know. Maybe it'll be more like 2 months. Like, how's this going to impact the overall program? What's the risk I need to bring up to the stakeholders
Yeah.
so that we can plan around it? Or likewise, like, hey, there's a set of data analysis that needs to be done. Maybe we should call Ralph Asher instead of having Bob, the inventory analyst, do our sales forecast and everything that the site is going to be based off of. So the foundational, being able to spot and identify those sources of risk and then work to mitigate. To me, that's really like the higher level value of, hey, do I have a good PMO supporting me?
Yeah. And people sometimes have this skill in house. Oftentimes they don't. Why have you do it as opposed to trying to do it themselves? Or when is it appropriate?
That's a good. I ask myself that sometimes too. Right. And I'd say it's taking a good look at your current organization and what you're trying to do. And you have to do an honest appraisal. Do I have the resources? Do I have the right people in house to run this? If you do new sites all the time, or you do complex implementations all the time, or big capital projects, you probably have a team, the real estate guys know what they're doing, analytics team, and where knows where to get the right forecasts and can size the facility appropriately with a provider. Your operations organizations knows who they have to hire and when they have to hire and may have internal talent they can transfer over. But if you don't have that team in house and you need some outside expertise or somebody to fill those roles, that's when you would go to a project consultant and say, "Hey, can you come on and support us? Can you help us define and shape the project before we get started? Can you help us plan it? Can you, on whatever specific work streams, can you help us execute this work? Provide input in maybe major procurement, for example, or hey, how's your testing cycle going to look? Maybe we can help you define that." That's going back to your original question. When should you go outside? When you don't have the capabilities inside, and that's something that only a the company is gonna know.
Yeah. It's so funny to see people think they can handle it, and sometimes they can, or like who do they have, and how much time does that person have, and like capacity is such a big challenge for people to put a new project on top of their daily responsibilities, and then like who's excited about that?
No, it's a good point, and this is what often happens. Like people are challenged on resources, and they don't. There are barriers to hiring. So if you, as you're going through the shaping and the definition phase, one of the tasks should be to say something like, "Who's going to be the team?" And maybe a first reflex is, Bobby and Johnny and Sarah over there can take care of this project, and they're also doing their day job. But it's really worth asking: is that do you want to assume that risk? Like, what if the project flips, or who's going to do their day job? Something's got to give for some of these very involved effort.
Yeah. So I would feel like most projects, like, of course, they're all unique, but like where people need help is probably different, or what clients value is different. I always think of like the work we do of like, is it finding the property that is where we're adding the most value? Is it in negotiating the deal? Is it in doing the contract and the contract negotiation? Is it just to keeping like a competing interests in alignment? Is it buffering like the candid feedback you're getting from both sides and like a matchmaking? And every client like is different of what they value or where like you were able to add the most value. So I thought maybe you had shared a couple assignments that you had worked on recently. Maybe those would be great examples of like sharing where you have been able to add value in the process. And so this, if you can share some about the trucking automation project, I feel like that's super exciting and something a lot of people haven't worked on before.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you're right on. Like, there's in these programs, there's some amount of tailoring what the client needs, where they see the most. If they're very sophisticated and they have processes for almost everything, you might just need to do a specialized kind of task or manage a certain process or control. Otherwise, it's like everything. In this program you're talking about, like some of these automation projects, most recently there was an automated truck loading project, and then before some other robotics project. A lot of the immediate value in that is shaping well, I'm not going to say immediate value. We did jobs ranging from, task coordination, planning, and managing some of the regular communication cadences. But I'd say a lot of the value came from, let's define the project, let's define the scope and what's going to happen, and let's build a business case, and let's define the structure for it. Once you get those things done at the beginning of a project, you say, here's the business case. Let's get the stakeholders aligned around that and make sure we have the resourcing plan and kind of like the initial setup done. A lot
Yep.
of the rest of the activities go very smoothly. But if you neglect that, if you don't define the scope properly, if the business case is not solid and you don't get your approvals, then it doesn't. Right. So I think a lot of our value is being able to help set these up correctly at the beginning and make sure that they're all aligned, and then the rest of the program is execution and control.
Man, I would say the minority of companies have all of those ducks in a row at the start of something. Just because usually it's like somebody feels a pain and then like it spirals out from there.
And they different companies do it different ways, but I have seen it where somebody takes an initiative and tries to run with that without being fully aligned through an investment, up through an investment committee level, and they run into blocks, or the sponsors are not aligned with the people trying to execute the project, or there's disagreement about scope later on. From 3PL world, I've seen this, secondhand with some implementations where the projects were just not operable. They went live and they couldn't function. You see that, and those are big problems, right? Like the client can't operate, the 3PL is on the hook. They're pointing at each other saying, "You told us that this is what it was going to have to do, and it's not doing that," and it turns into lawsuits and a big problem. So I think having that initial like definition of the project, hey, this is what it's going to do. Here are the starting assumptions. We've thought about contingencies, and everybody's on the same page. That's super important.
Yeah. For this trucking project, what was the starting state versus the end state? This was, yeah.
Yeah, the starting state was conventionally loaded 53-foot trucks, full pallet, unit loads or handling load. And they're probably 7-day a week operations. So you've got running across probably 50 doors or so, loading trucks. And then at the end of it, there are robots loading the trucks, or I think primarily like drop trailers right now. The live loads pose a couple different scheduling challenges, but it's taking robotics, and then the pallets are staged by another robotic system, and then the truck loading robots pick up the pallets and put them in the trucks. And so there were a few challenges with that, like on the tech side, overcoming some layout constraints, and then how do you integrate the robotics with your docks, your dock doors, for example, and then using it into basically a brownfield operation. But that was
And then I got to imagine you pilot it, or you like you trial it at one dock or at a couple docks, and then you like just keep rolling it out.
That's right. So the validation it starts kind of at the supplier evaluation during procurement, saying, "Hey, what are your references? Can we see it? Do you have a prototype we can evaluate and look at and say, is this going to work or not?" And then you can have the supplier come on site and prototype it at your facility and check for problems. And then, like you said, once the tech is getting implemented on the system side and the hardware side, you do a staged takeover along the dock. So yeah, you mitigate risk. You don't try to do a big bang, launch everything at once. It's more of a staged rollout to control anything bad that could happen.
Yeah. And then what are the common missteps you see? You probably have like for me, I could think of like endless. Like in each phase, there's probably like a three most common missteps. And so oftentimes for us, it's like you're not qualified to take that next larger building. You missize it, you have the wrong person in charge of trying to like run the project. You don't have like corporate authority. Those are all normal ones, but like, yeah, the sizing one is always huge, or you don't understand like operating expenses and you're looking at like net versus gross. How long, man, all day long is like, how long does it take to do the process?
Mhm.
To find the building, negotiate it, do the contract, and then do the construction, get the permits, get the certificate of occupancy, and then to move in and like overlapping those. And so when should you start? Like we get into those types of conversations all the time. If it's a year out, or if it's 6 months out, or if it's 18 months out. So I got to imagine you have like the common pitfalls. What are some of the main ones?
Yeah, and thanks for giving me a little time to collect my thoughts there as you went through those.
You're the preventer of pitfalls. So yes.
I think structurally it starts with, when you're running a program, it starts with, have we identified all the stakeholders? There's a common list of kind of like major risks, right? Like, are the stakeholders identified? Do I have an integrated team with everybody represented? Are there new technologies involved? Are there, what is the experience of the team with the technology? That type of thing. So where I would say pitfalls that jump out to me in programs are having some sort of stage evaluation and approval process for a program. Like you start with, we know we want to do something in here, and eventually tightening it down in terms of cost and schedule and scope too. We know we want to do this thing, right? You say, okay, we start with maybe a plus 30 minus 15 cost estimate, or plus 40 minus 15% cost estimate of this program. And then you go through the exercise of refining your quote, drilling into the scope and defining what you're actually going to do. If a company is not doing that, somebody's going to end up disappointed, right? You're going to blow budget, you're going to blow schedule, you're not going to get what you wanted. The second pitfall that I would note that jumps out in my mind is the allocation of analyst resourcing to a program.
Okay.
A lot of times people talk about defining what you want to do. It seems to be the hardest part. Actually executing it, once you know what you want to do, relatively easy. But defining the business processes and defining exactly what you want to do is often a stumbling block. It often takes much longer than people want. That's where you have to make up all your rework and do all your change orders and make it up on the back end. So investing correctly in analysis and definition up front avoids a lot of risk on the back end. And then probably this is more a general observation, is that everything takes longer than you think it will, because like you said, I think you talked about leases a little bit earlier, but procurement, contract, any sort of large legal agreement will take
Man, yes. Let's get
longer.
some attorneys in there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, You had a post on that the other day, I think. Like get the business leads in with the attorneys and streamline the back and forth. But that's something you have to plan for and buffer in your schedules. Is are these things actually going to take what we think? Is there any reserve in my schedule to account for these things being variable? Those are probably the three major things. Some sort of gated definition process, correct analysis of your problem and your operation requirements, and then a schedule buffering for those softer, less defined tasks.
Yes. Risk mitigation, Paul, you got that on lockdown. I love it. That's huge because if you're a CEO, new project, new location, new risk,
Mhm.
how do
Well,
we ensure we keep it on the rails?
this stuff's important, right? Like people's careers are on the line, their personal reputations are, they're personally invested. The company's putting a lot of money and time into whatever the thing is that they're doing. They want a good result, and they should be aware of, hey, this is where that value from that project can degrade or fall off. It can degrade from bad initial forecasts. You can have schedule losses. You can have operability losses. Like we planned for this thing to do 100 pallets a day, and it's only doing 55. Well, oh booger, what are we going to do? Right? How do you fix it?
Yeah. And then I saw something you wrote about contingencies. It's money you expect to spend.
Uh-huh.
What's the idea with that mindset shift?
Well, I think again, looking at this from a lens of risk mitigation, you have an idea of the costs on a project that you're going to spend. You may even have quotes in hand, but there are certain things that are known risks that you have to plan for, and certain things that are, call it just variation or unknown risks. So when you're budgeting, you should account for those somehow. Have some sort of approach to, wow, we're gonna buy racking in 3 or 4 months. What if the steel index goes up 10%? Well, geez, like maybe that's a risk that we need an allowance for, or some section of the contingency. And when that doesn't happen, then we can release that money out of the project. So you need to look at your project, your risk register, or whatever you think the big stumbling blocks may be, and say, okay, if this goes wrong, what's it going to cost? And then, for all the stuff that we don't know that could go wrong, let's account for that. Because when you're budgeting, companies are going to look at a lot of these projects from a payback perspective or an NPV perspective. And if you don't have a contingency built in or some sort of planning, then something goes wrong, and you blow the payback. So you need to plan for that again up front.
Yeah. And you are privy to some of those conversations or part of them of like the ROI for different systems, for different projects or like payback periods.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where some of the experience and the value add comes in too. Saying, okay, let's prepare. Let's prepare. Do some sort of payback analysis on this automation system. Okay, let's look at the hardware, the software, the infrastructure, the difference in the capex and the opex that's going to occur, and present a point of view on, yeah, does it make financial sense? Maybe there are some other benefits that come from it too. Yes. And then you can say, as part of that project, let's put some contingencies in for the known risk. And does it still make sense?
What's good payback versus bad? Or like, what would you say are like contextually of like ones you have found that like are better or worse, or like put some numbers or some time frames to like projects and return?
Well, that's tough. I think it's dependent on company context. Like if you look at a 3PL with a 3-year contract term or a 5-year contract term with a client, their definition for a good payback might be has to pay back in a year, has to pay back in 2 years, or
Tomorrow.
well, we'll do whatever as long as the client's paying for it, right?
Yes.
Or if you have companies with a longer time horizon, they might say automation is integral to our strategy as a company, the direction that we're going. And so we're willing to accept the payback that 5 or 10 years out if it means that we can mitigate labor market risk or something like that. We're willing to do those things now instead of later.
Yeah. Uh, uh, and automation's talked about a lot. There's a million sizes and shapes of it. Like, what percentage of the projects you work on have some component piece to that? I got to imagine it's going up by the day.
Probably, I don't know, call it three quarters or so. We've done some infrastructure, some like civil infrastructure project, if you will, that did not involve automation. Okay, so those are sort of a different category. And then we've done some operational improvement, like pick path improvement, and managed the site move for a 3PL inventory move between a couple sites. So those did not involve automation, but the rest have in one way or another.
Yeah. And then 3PLs, you've done some work for them. I got to imagine like this in-source or outsource is never ending journey. Like everybody's always doing one or the other, or the market has changed, or they're in a different part of their growth or scale. And then it makes sense to outsource, and then we're bringing it back in. I got to imagine that's a lot of work for you, is just participating in that process.
It's I've been on both. We've been on both sides. So working, my consultant and I have been worked for 3PLs, and then we've also done project as PL program for 3PL, and then also we work with folks who use 3PL, right? So we've kind of been on both sides, and what I've seen is it's sort of an ebb and flow. I mean the some of the strategy I've seen with using 3PLs is saying, hey, they're a capacity buffer. A longer term kind of higher investment capacity buffer, but you kind of like you may bring in contingent labor in a warehouse, make up for staffing shortages or staffing needs at peak times. 3PLs can fill some of those non-level gaps up in capacity. And I think that I've seen that with secondhand, like Amazon, I believe, used XPO for that reason. A few years back, at least, Amazon insourced some things and they changed their warehouse strategy, and so it kind of comes in and goes with the needs of the business. Of course, then you're going to run into people who use 3PLs exclusively for all their business, like all the time. So I don't know that I can make any blanket statement about when it's good or bad or a general trend.
Yeah, I think it's more of just like, how do you participate in that process?
Hmm.
I guess
Yeah, I think
whether,
it's going back, like, looking at it starts, I think, with a cost and a network analysis thing. Where do we think going back to forecasts and sales forecasts, where do we think the volume is going to be, and what are we going to do to meet it? And then that leads into some real option analysis of, should I bring it in-house, or should I outsource it and talk to my 3PL provider? So there's kind of a decision tree in there on how to approach it.
yeah. One of my favorite quotes is from John Curtis that I have worked with on a couple of projects. And it's like, all projects have a bump, or there's always like something that happens, just in the sense of like, life happens, schedules change, there's a hurricane or something. And then like all projects have, I call it the wrinkle, right? And all deals have a wrinkle. So I imagine you have had those in your projects, and like try and have strategies for how to deal with them. So, can you contemplate any that you've dealt with that were challenges that you had to overcome, where the project was changing, whether it's in or out of your control, and like how you deal with it, or like what can be common there?
Yeah, I think in thinking about that question, the Project Management Institute (PMI), I think recently, last couple of years, updated their definition of project success to, a project is successful if all the stakeholders agree that the value is worth the cost and effort. Right. So it's a little bit of a self-licking ice cream cone. Like, everybody agrees it's good, so it was good. You have to assume the executives know what they're doing and are good intention. But I think that goes to how you tackle these wrinkles and these problems. If people are, if they're well informed, and you make your moves or your pivots based on what provides the most value in the project, then you can come through successfully. So if, for example, you're going through a project and, oh my goodness, like, we'd said we were going to go live in January, but it's just not going to happen. It's going to happen in April, right? You have
I
a
feel like
couple
this
options.
is like 80% of my projects. Yeah.
Right. You have a couple options. You can say, all right, all right, stakeholders and executives, we have a couple options. Like, the meteor hit our existing site. The GC has to start over. Force majeure clause. Like, we're going to have to eat the cost. Like, that stinks. What are our options? Like, okay, we mitigate this through, we can either accept it, we can adjust scope, or we can find some sort of alternate course of action. But I think that kind of mindset is, how do I create the most, it sounds very like buzzwordy, but how do I create the most value with the situation? And
Yeah.
if everybody agrees to accept a delay, like, hey, we got a delay in design, which has happened, right? Like, hey, our functional design period was supposed to be 3 months, it's gone 6 months. But along the way, we've kept all the stakeholders involved, and so everybody agrees, yep, the problems caused by terminating design early are just going ahead. The risk is too great. We're going to finish the design as we're doing it and then go on with deployment. So that's kind of like an example. And how do you deal with it? You keep people in, you don't hide the bad news. You don't pretend you're going to make a commitment you can't make.
Yeah.
You're transparent, and then you keep people informed of the trade-offs along the way. And then at the end, people have agreed along the way that the value is worth the trade-off. So I think that's the mindset.
Yeah. Don't make lemonade with the lemons. Make strawberry lemonade. Let's make the best lemonade we can.
I think
Yeah.
this makes, like, contemporary figures. Like, as a PM, you read about, like, Elon Musk's approach to some of these things, which was like, cut the schedule in half. Like,
Yes.
I have tremendous respect for people who can cut through the noise and do things like that. But in a lot of contexts, that's not feasible for a variety of like environmental or cultural or just governance factors. That type of thing can happen, but again, you have to tailor your approach to the people you're working with.
Yes. So you would enjoy working at Tesla,
I don't know. I have great respect for Tesla and people like that.
making the impossible possible.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's again, it goes back to the environment you're in. What's possible in your particular project environment.
Yes. You tell me about this simple dim. This is something you built?
Oh boy, yeah, I found myself doing some one too many Excel based like diagrams or layout or drawing crude shapes in PowerPoint to represent real world objects. I programmed a add-in that lets you set scales in feet or meters or inches or whatever it is in your PowerPoint slide, and then draw a scale diagram there. So you can actually say, hey, I want to create a building that is 1100 feet by 700 feet on this scale on my slide, and then I want a 300 foot by 300 foot shape position within that, and it'll draw things to scale uh, on your slide, scales, dimensions, and measurement in PowerPoint.
Yeah. Because you are always presenting the project. Where are we at? What are we going to do? How did it change? And we always have a facility and a layout and things that are different.
Or you're facilitating a discussion. Hey guys, there's a discussion about is this going to go here or here, or how far is it from here to? There's a lot of questions that can come up when you're going through various approvals, design sessions, or facilitating other questions.
Yeah, I love being a builder, writing a book, building a tool, saying like I'm in the mix, and what is helpful and relevant for folks. What other tools do you use? Would you say that are common for you in your practice and on your projects?
Always Excel. I don't think that's everybody. Everything is a front end for Excel, so no surprises there. And then I found also with our other favorite recent technology, our large language models that keep getting better and better, that it's very easy to script in your language of choice, in this case, mine being Python, things to answer specific questions. So I found myself doing some simulations or some like option pricing for different procurement things like that. Hey, if we want to fix a price for this steel right now, how much is it worth to pay versus what it might be in a month or two? Like answering that type of question. So
Yeah,
was
I
there a
love
lot
that
of
you've been able to add it to your mix. I know Python is not like the same as ChatGPT or like Claude Code or something like that, but like everyone's figuring out like how does that fit
uh,
into your
yeah,
new.
those books really democratize like the use of code. Like I can't code, like I'm not a programmer, much less an actual developer, but you can say, hey, I have this problem with these parameters. Give me something that will simulate it, and then you can figure out enough to make it work and make it relevant to answer your question. And so it
Yeah,
really does democratize access to a lot of these. Maybe functionality you'd spend a lot more time trying to figure out in other ways.
yeah, I love that. And for you to figure out like what's next, what else can you add, how else can you be helpful, and how else can you like utilize those in your process
Hmm.
internally. I know that's been tough for me. And then to figure out like how do clients resonate with it other than just like you can do your job for them better, or like how can you?
Yeah, I mean that's it's presenting insights, right? Like if you're working with a client and they say, I have this problem, and you can say something like, well, let me help you frame the answer to this problem by introducing these different ways of looking at it. That's really vague language, but that's the best way I can think right now to describe it. I have a decision to make. How can I illuminate that decision using different
Yeah, bring new insights as a result.
uh, yep.
I think if we're at 9:55, Paul, it's probably time for closing out with a couple of what's on the horizon for you. Like
Boy,
anything interesting and exciting project wise, or any like I know it's been a wild year of like changes and like uncertainty with clients, and then like a new technologies. What's on your mind for as you just think through the next year, or things you're excited about?
yeah, we've got some pipeline that could be exciting on different automation and site implementations. Excuse me. From a business point of view, always looking to expand and grow the business. And if I can get to a third employee, then that's great. But along the way, let's find some interesting programs where we can help people and deliver some successful, if you will, supply chain initiatives. So keeping that going, and then we've got some ongoing engagements. So I want to keep my current very valued clients very happy, of course. So keep that satisfaction high.
That's the
And
best
then
part.
what's that? Yeah.
That's the best part.
And then from a tech point of view, I don't know that there are any. Yeah, I think the AI current investment levels are probably something of a bubble, but the technology is not mature yet. So we'll continue to see that mature and look forward to seeing how that affects the industry, and that's on the horizon. And then the little kids, of course, which we talked about.
Yes, I love it. It's so hard to know how much of the AI comes to fruition next year, and like what's that change, and how's it change what is possible, and yeah, just how much more like it can allow you to help people. So that's it's always boggles my mind to figure out like the next new incremental improvement that we can utilize.
From a tech point of view, we should keep our eye on the prediction markets that are becoming very popular.
Yes.
I'll bet you those have a lot of, I don't know how they're going to be used yet, but when you think about forecasting things happening and that can affect, do I get a warehouse or not? Do I make some decisions about my supply chain? I would not be surprised to see prediction markets integrated in interesting ways in supply chain planning.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great one. It's just like the collective knowledge of what people know, and everybody like
Mhm.
having a chance to render their opinion and like to see how they stack up.
Yep. Yeah, I think, that plus some, I don't know, AI is the answer to everything, but prediction markets and AI are gonna drive a lot of, planning and these types of implementations that.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for taking the time, Paul. That was good to spend time with you. So we got program and project management and went through maybe not A to Z, but a lot of what is most helpful and topical for people. And you got a book that people should probably check out because anyone who's listening is in operations, they're facility managers, they're corporates, they're brokers, they're investors that want to know more about the people that are in their buildings. So I love that part. I'll pick up a copy and love to check it out.
All right, and I've got yours on the way, so I'm looking forward to it too. Thank you so much, Gus. I really
Yep.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to you later, Paul. Have a good one. Yep. Bye bye.